basically, again, my name is Garnie Bolling, and I am going to be walking you through what I think is driving business outcomes with data. Now, the nice thing about all of these things is that, throughout my 20 years or 20 plus years in data, really there's so much that's going on. And every new business initiative, every new project, every new edict that comes around, or even compliance aspects of it, requires understanding, knowing, working with your data. Every integration that I have is data. So let me walk you through a little bit about that. I spent time with teams like IBM, EMC Business Consulting, Microsoft Consulting. I've done lots of work with other players in this space. My specialty now is around metadata and metadata management around this information. So let me go ahead and get started on my presentation here. Oops. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what are the business outcomes? What are we seeing in the market? We'll also talk a little bit about readiness. What does that really mean? And then, of course, we'll talk about what are some perspectives around solutioning in this area. And then we'll jump right into the roundtable. But for me, I really want to make sure that you guys ask questions. If you guys have anything that you want to know, anything that you need, I'm going to be monitoring the chat sessions here. So let me go ahead and bring this down and minimize all of my sessions here so that way I can see my chats. So if you got any questions or anything else like that, please let us know. Okay. So let's start off with business outcomes. Oops. How many of you guys have been asked? I mean, this is really a rhetorical question. How many of you have been asked to help with data? Where is it? What is it? I mean, I remember when I was a young analyst starting off with data or just databases itself, where is the information located? And you know what? That problem has never really been solved, right? Every day today, somebody's asking, where is it? Where can I get it? And sometimes now with all the information that's proliferated in your organization, guess what? It could be stale. You don't know if you're using the most current information. You don't know who has access to that information. You don't know if it's relevant going forward. So this is what we're talking about. Have you been asked? And the answer is always yes. You've involved in, so it doesn't matter what level of leadership you're always dealing with data. So when it comes to business outcomes of that, data is not data readiness, okay? So when we start talking about information, what we're looking at is, let me turn this off here real quick. I'm getting so many dings on my side. Business outcomes is not just data. It's being able to leverage the data for things like transformations. So a lot of organizations are moving to clouds or refactoring their organizations or refactoring the way they do business. Down the bottom left, mergers and acquisitions and divestitures. A lot of organizations are asking the question, how do I deal with these proxies? How do I deal with moving information? Am I sending the correct information to proxy? Or if I'm acquiring new information, how do I map that information back into my organization? And the only ways you're being able to do that effectively is, again, knowing the information on both sides. Upper right-hand corner, data democratization. More and more folks in every project I've gone into, the business is asking for access. If the joke I usually have, and I know the statutes of limitations are over, but back one of my consulting days, I used to have to get data from my customers. And what I would do is log into a domain, log into an application, log into a specific set and pull the information from there. It got to the point that it was so tedious getting to the data, I started copying the information. Now, the moment I copied the information, it became stale. It wasn't real. So if I decided to not go back in a week, I'm still using stale data. So these are the challenges that we have is if you put too much governance or control on information, the business is going to find a way of getting access to it. So how do we build a platform to enable this kind of access or that type of democratization? And ERP modernizations, people are moving from traditional to cloud. And then, of course, even within the cloud aspects, new ways of accessing the information from there. How can we help out with that? Well, first and foremost, do we look at the right information at the right time? Do we know about the access requirements for that? Are you putting too many resources on an existing application or ERP application or a module that you need to move that information off and create a new data store of that? How do you keep that information in sync so that way organizations can still access the information in relative real time without burdening your systems? So that's another way of looking at how these different outcomes are surrounded by data. Again, it's not just about data, it's being able to use that data set. Now, the joke we have within my organization is data is the new oil. Some of you guys have heard that, but there's always that other tagline that's right below it: until it catches fire. Yeah, the thing is like you got all this data, you got all this information. That's great, that's wonderful, until it catches fire, and then all of a sudden you can just imagine the chaos that's involved with it. Let's say, for example, a regulatory change or a new initiative that's kicked in, or there is a new push for business transformations. This is what we're talking about when we're saying fire, but data is the new oil. So how do you handle that? How do you use it? And how do you understand it? So let's talk about the readiness itself. Being able to, unknown data is everywhere. You know, one of the studies that I've worked with is that over 60% of the data in an organization is untapped or unknown. Let me just say that again. 60% of the data within an organization is untapped or unknown. Now, the reason why that's happened is because of the frequencies, the changes, and things like, not every piece of data needs to be understood, but a lot of that, think about it, if you're only using 40% or less of known data, are you really taking advantage of the information that you have? That gold that you have sitting out there. One of the stories I like to talk about is in World War II, there was a statistician who was working with the U.S. Army Air Corps that when the bombers were coming back from their raids in Europe, what they would do is they would study the bullet holes inside or on the aircraft. And what they were finding out, they decided that, oh, we're going to shore up all of these areas in these aircrafts. One of the statisticians came back and said, you know what? I really don't think you are looking at the right data. You should be looking at the data of the aircraft that has been taken down. You shouldn't be looking at the data that's here in front of you. You're using the wrong information set to better understand how you shore up your aircraft. So those aircraft that are coming back have survived. Those that didn't survive, you want to know where they were hit the most. So that way you can ensure they are properly armored. Timeliness of information. Again, remember I was talking about stale data. There is a lot of information that's out there that's duplicated that becomes stale. And a lot of times we become creatures of habit. And that way we are always going back to that same spreadsheet or that same activity or that same directory or information set. And sometimes we don't know that that information has changed or there's new dynamic information that's out there. Security, who has access to what and when? That's another major area that's concerning with data. We all know about GPA, the right to forget, California Privacy Acts. We know that other states are going to be enacting those global requirements. First and foremost, you need to know who has access to your data and what data needs to be secured. That's the other part of it. It's being able to identify, let's say, personal identified information and be able to know that it's there. So if you haven't been on a PII project, how do you know that the data has PII? So wouldn't you like to have ways to be able to understand it and can log the information of who has access to it? And of course, lack of collaboration. More and more of that democratization of data is really around collaboration. I need access to this data. How can I use it? Also, reuse kicks in. If someone in one department is doing one thing and it's relatable for the corporation, wouldn't it be great to be able to share that, reuse that across the organization? It's not just the integration, it's the data, what you did to the data, what was the definitions of the data, how do you actually put information around the data to make it relatable? And of course, poor data quality. The joke I have with everyone is, how can you create a data quality rule around any data if you don't know what the data looks like? Now, a lot of folks come back and say, I know what it looks like, I just have to pull it up. Well, is that the true fact? That's just point in time. What about as time goes on, data degrades? How do you mitigate that? How about new resources and new data sets that are available? So some of the other areas that we talk about, let's talk about money. $3.1 trillion is lost by corporations around the world because they're using unqualified data. Unqualified. That could be meaning that it's stale or that it's not properly formatted or it's not properly used or it's just wrong. So How do you know any of those things are happening other than your bottom line? 60% of the organization are just saying that the information is untapped. So again, remember that statistic I tell you, if you're only using 40% of your data to make analytical decisions or business decisions, wouldn't it be great to know more about it so you can make better decisions or more informed information or better strategies going forward? And the 70% really bothers me. They have access to information they shouldn't have access to. So you need to identify those people. You need to identify those data sets. Who has access to what? And then on top of that, apply policies. Can they see all the HR information? Do we want to obfuscate that column? Do we want to actually hide that column or that database table, or even hide that CSV file so no one can see it? And of course, time. If you spend a lot of time looking for information, and I know I have, is going around asking often, where is this information? You find out that we're becoming more data wranglers than data stewards or data analysts. This is what's happening in the market today. When you have all of it, you combine all four of these points, now you know that there's a need for understanding the information, documenting it, and being able to work with it. So I call it the discovery, document, and delivering of the information in the right context. Data strategies, Gartner brought this up, and I really enjoy my friend Chris Montanaro, who actually keeps pushing this, and I really have come to like this, is being able to understand, do you have a defensive strategy around data or an offensive strategy? Just like any other sports, there's a defensive team. You're always preventing. They're trying to hold back. They're trying to make sure that am I aligned with compliance, as there's always data quality issues. Yes, that's very important. That's to mitigate any type of risks. But look on the other side, the offensive side. Are you and your organization moving forward, being offensive with your data, leveraging all that you can, being able to take advantage of that new information set that you have or that new analytical data and make better decisions across that versus just keeping the lights on or doing the same things over and over again? This is what we're talking about from a data strategy point of view. Nothing's wrong with being on either side. What's happening, but especially on the defensive side. But when you're in the defensive mode and you start to understand and put in policies or to better understand how to use that information, you creep over into the offensive side and start using that information for the benefit of your organization. So let's talk about a little bit about perspectives in that space. I work for Boomi LLC, and basically we're an organization around integration and data. And what we do best is being able to connect resources to other resources, people to resources, and data to resources. And then what we're meaning by is we look at this, what I like to call this the airplane slide. We really do like to focus on data readiness, the pervasive connectivity of connecting to almost 99% of the market, and be able to have people engaged with this. And we're talking about technologies that are unique to this industry. It's not just iPaaS integration. It's being able to tie into iPaaS with proper understanding of your data. It's also taking iPaaS and tying it to people activities, or let's say escalation methods or orchestration of that information. What about basic business functions like B2B or EDI transactions that are out there, or leveraging technologies like API and taking it to the next level? And being able to say, you know what, APIs are a center of everything so that we can make all these processes microservices, but at the same time, we can use services like being able to discover the data and share that through integration, share that with analysts, and share that with reporting, okay? So another aspects about Boomi, we're pretty proud of ourselves, and we're really happy because it's not us, it's actually our community. It's our friends, it's our families, it's those who are using our technologies. If you're using our technologies, thank you very much for being part of our family. We're getting close. I mean, we're doing 8 customers a day, which is phenomenal. I've been in the integration space for quite a long time, and we've got quite a large number of community members that are out there helping out with this. I mean, tremendous growth and certifications that go along with it. So I'm going to pause right there because I see quite a lot of chat that's happening out there. One of the questions how do you actually start taking inventory of data? This is where metadata strategies really kick in. When you start thinking about, let me go back to this slide here. The far left of this slide is where we discover the information. How do you crawl? we're not suggesting that we put a worm out there to crawl everything that you have. What we're asking you to do is, how do you connect to those systems and collect all the meta information that's out there? Now, the challenge is a lot of folks want to look at the raw data, but that's massive amounts of information. What we find out is that if we're able to collect the meta information, categorize those and catalog those, that actually can help out a lot. And it's more efficient to catalog meta information versus raw information across the board. Now, of course, once you collect the information, then you need to do other activities and steps associated with it. And I'll cover that in a few more slides. Did ask if we're in the education field? Absolutely. We have many, many customers in that field. All right, cool. All right, let's go ahead and move on with this presentation going forward. Data readiness approach. I actually, I spent over 8 years in the metadata space, and I really come up with this strategy here. First we have to be able to connect to the data. Now, when we say connections, it's like being able to understand what those systems are. It could be an AS400, it could be a service, it could be a flat file, it could be a sample payload for my JSON document, it could be a traditional relational database, it could be those new databases or new data store systems like a Snowflake or a Delta Lake from Databricks that are out there. Being able to understand those connections are really important, because once you understand those, then you understand how to read and work with the meta information that they're providing. Next is to be able to collect the information, harvest just meta information, DDL information if you're going to be looking at databases, or if you're going to be looking at header information, or if you're going to be looking at how the file is structured from let's say a JSON document, from all the different elements that are out there. This is what we mean by collecting the information. Cultivation is a really interesting point. If you don't mind, let me indulge you with a little bit more of what cultivation really means, and I'll come back to this slide. When I was a kid, I used to do a lot of walking around in the woods of Virginia and things like that, and I would find pottery. So I'm going to go ahead and use some of my friends. My friend Todd, let's say Todd has a couple hundred acres up in Michigan, and we know that there's lakes on his place, and we're going to go fishing. And one of the things I like to do is we like to walk around and hike in the area. So if Todd and I are walking around, we all of a sudden see this rock that looks different than any other rock that's out there. So if he picks up this data set or he picks up this rock, he knows two things about it already. Just because of the characteristics of it, we already know the type of data because it's a piece of pottery. And we also know the location because it is his property. Now, after we have a successful fishing venue, we go into town and we meet with the curator at a local museum. And we ask the curator, hey, could you give us more information around this piece of pottery? And the curator could actually walk us to a display and show us other data sets or other potteries that are part of this area, not just your property, but the surrounding area. Now, of course, if you continue to look a little bit further, you might find a piece of pottery that has a missing piece that's just like the shape that you have in your hand. The curator and you decide that you're going to collaborate by contributing this piece of data set to complete this pottery or this data set for this project. So what you're doing is you're now offering up what you found, offering up what you have to complete other projects. And because you've contributed, you become a friend of that museum. And what you have now, access to all the research and information around that indigenous tribe that lived in that area, how they lived, how they hunt, how they survived, how they migrated. You know a plethora of information around that culture just because you had and you found one piece of data, and that was that shard of pottery that you brought in to collaborate with. This is what we mean by cultivation, is being able to find something, share, collaborate with, find out more information, be part of a community, make that makes sense to it. Now, once you've gone through that cultivation phase, it's going through being able to discover what is it. I'm searching against it. I'm looking at it. I want to discover more about it. I want to document more information around that data set. And then next is to take action. This is that self-service capability. So looking and starting this all over again, is connect, collect, cultivate, discover, and taking action. This is the foundation of how you can actually move down your data readiness journey, or how do you go down the journey of any data project. Because once you understand the connect and collection aspects of it, and you can cultivate the information around that, and you can make it discoverable and knowledgeable or enhance the information, then you could take action or allow that self-service capability to kick in there. Okay. So key takeaways I wanted to make sure everyone here is familiar with and had an understanding. Your driven business outcomes, data is not just data readiness, it's being able to look at specific projects. Every project has data associated with it. It doesn't matter if it's marketing, mergers and acquisitions, transformations, or any of those type of things. You're looking at massive amounts of information. So again, discovering and understanding that information is so important. Same thing with readiness, is being able to be ahead. Again, are you on the defensive side or are you on the offensive side? Are you on the defensive side and you're looking for a roadmap to get to the next level, to get to the offensive side to where you can actually make more sense of the information? Do you want to follow a methodology, a way to reuse the assets that you have or reuse assets that go from discovering the information, mastering it, being able to integrate it and orchestrating that with people and systems and organizations that are out there? And that's why point number 3 kicks in, and why I'm proud to be part of the Boomi organization, is that I get to do this kind of work. I get to help developers, business analysts, organizations, leaders in the business to understand the information they have and to move that data or that understanding through the supply chain over that pipeline of information. So that way, at the end, you have the outcomes that you're expecting that are out there. We could actually do from a value streaming point of view, absolutely. That is part of what we do. Again, it's providing you that information so you can make a value statement out of it. You can actually show, and this is what I like to talk about, the impact analysis, if I can take it to the next level. Folks like to talk about impact analysis or lineage or where the data is or how it's being transacted. What I like to talk about is being able to not just harvest the information, but when you take action against that data, when you like to know that what has happened, who did it, what was actually done to that information. And by the way, that new report or that new data set that was created, wouldn't it be nice to add that back into the catalog so you can restart that life cycle of that information so that way people can seek and find the work you've done and gain insight from that. So yes, that's part of the metadata strategies that we have at Boomi, is being able to enable organizations to create new assets, add that back to the pool so that people can leverage, use, and understand, and in fact, learn from each other or take advantage of each other's work as we move forward. Asked about, can we find specific data that's residing on specific systems? You know, the way we actually look at the collection aspects or the connection point of view is if there's data that's sitting on someone's laptop and you got to find a way of being able to connect to it. Like, for example, if someone has an Access database and they're processing work there, you know, that's always been the challenge. You know, people who are doing their own thing, it's not a bad thing, but it's more of like, how can you contribute to that? So that's why when we talk about a cataloging solution, we encourage people to contribute, right? Instead of trying to be draconian and say, I have to have access to your data, it's more of like, you know what, for compliance and regulatory aspects, yes, we might have to have it, but there's also the give back component. Encourage them to give. In fact, all we would need to do is scan their information and make it available. So they could continue to do the work they do on their laptops or their systems. But if you're encouraging them to contribute, we can actually connect to their system maybe once a day or once a week to get the latest information of that data asset that's sitting out there. You know, it could be a struggle trying to get people to use new tools. But the story I go with is, how did we all become fans of Google? So let me just start off that way. Bing is a valid tool. You know, Microsoft Bing is a valid search engine, and it's valid so people can use it. But how many of us are actually using that tool? Now, the hard part is, even though it's a valid tool, I'm not using it. So why am I using the competitive Google aspects of it? And the reason why I like Google is because there's an emotional connection to Google, a slight emotional connection. See, I'm not being forced to use Google, but Google has given me the opportunities to find the information I want when I want and feel comfortable with it. And in fact, it has become a popular platform to contribute or to look for information. So I have an emotional connection to Google. So this is what we're trying to do with an analyst organization with our user interfaces, to keep it simple, so that way people can navigate and they feel trusting that the information that they're looking for is there. So that way our global search is tied in with our artificial intelligence engine to give you so much information, and then you can pare down that information to the information sets you need. In fact, if you go with the traditional approach, they're going to go and look for other means. There are other ways of looking for data. So if you have a platform that enables them to save anywhere from 50 to 60% of their time looking for data, this is where we can say you can do more of your job versus being a data wrangler. So Heather, I hope that helps. It is a data cultural shift. There's nothing that we can do. Like, data governance is a great thing. We just can't get everybody to do it. But we have to find ways of encouraging folks to get involved. And that's where I find the greatest success is getting people to have an emotional connection, feel comfortable, feel trusting that the information sets that are in there are available. And they can actually contribute to it versus just be a user and walk away. You know, this business outcomes with around data is a difficult journey for any organization if you're doing it for the very first time. But we're all are in this together. And this is why when you look at metadata strategies, you start looking at business tools so you can actually connect and cultivate and then take action against the information, better understanding that contribution. And lastly, being able to move that information where you need it. How many of us have just copied the data and moved it to where we needed it without having any development activity whatsoever or any interactions with integrations? Well, what if we gave you a platform so you could build your own, and that way it could be shared with other folks? So that way, and plus 6 months from now, you're not trying to recreate it. All you have to do is reuse what you've already done. What is the best advice you can give us data wranglers to move away from wrangling and more towards strategic activities? The best thing to do is, again, getting folks to contribute. I go back to that piece of pottery point of view. Encourage them to contribute. That's the best way I can explain it. It's just like with everywhere else. It's no matter where you say, if it's a master data project, a data governance project, or any of those things, it's a great idea. But a great idea is just that. What I try to do is encourage folks to just contribute and just start off with yourself and encourage your team, your organization. And then all of a sudden people will find out that need your information, all of a sudden find out that, hey, because of your efforts, it's becoming more contagious, if that makes sense. There's no easy button on wrangling aspects of it. I actually had one customer walk up to me and say, Garnie, we don't do data wrangling, we're data janitors. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay. How can we help with that? So we found organizations and teams actually doing this together to make the data culture more applicable for contributions and feedback and things like that. So I know there's a lot of people out there who would like to give feedback. I mean, that's why Yelp and all these reviews on Amazon are so important, right? Because people are giving feedback. What if we gave that feedback back inside the data catalog? Yeah, this is how we can help foster going from wrangling to being your actual analyst or data journey, your data manipulation.
I do want to thank you so much, Garnie. This has been really informative. Given the participation in this session, it's been really wonderful.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.